What is up, everyone? Brandon First, aka First Report, representing the First Off the Bench podcast network. Everyone comes off the bench. We are first. Welcome into the return of the In the Paint podcast. We break down everything college basketball has to offer. With me, as always, is my co-host, Raider Jim Martinez. You can find Raider Jim at Raider Jim 1090 on Twitter. How you doing tonight, sir?
Hey, I'm doing great. I guess we're kind of like the new strain of whatever it is that's infecting people because you thought you got rid of us, but we just keep on
Mm-hmm.
coming back.
Yep. We are full override this time of year as well. We got, of course, college basketball, and we'll be recording NFL tomorrow. So full overdrive on the podcast network. And it's a great time of year. Obviously, everyone kind of gets into their sweatpants, their sweatshirts, and bundles up for the winter and enjoys some. Hopefully, we've seen some really good football, and we've seen some very interesting basketball as well, which we'll dive into momentarily. But first, we will talk with one of the bigger stories, really, of the offseason that goes beyond just basketball, or college basketball, I should say, and it's the conference realignment. And we've seen a lot of movement. We've seen off seasons where we've seen bigger move or more teams moving and things like that. But it's not too often you see a blockbuster like USC and UCLA jumping from the Pac-12. They will join the Big Ten. I guess they're going to keep the Big Ten. They'll have 100 teams in that conference, and it'll still be the Big Ten. But it will happen in the 2024 year. So we still have this year, and then next year, and then going into essentially two basketball seasons, two football seasons from now, we'll see that. But big question is, how does this affect college sports in basketball and in the other sports? So, Raider Jim, what are your thoughts on USC and UCLA heading to the Big Ten?
On the big picture, I got to tell you, this is kind of like the whole college basketball rankings year in and year out. There's no more. I guess there are dynasties, so to speak, but not with those familiar faces. You got the kids that come in out of high school, they do their 1 year, they bail, they go here, they go there. Now you've got the teams transferring, it's almost sacrilege to me on some levels. You've got it wasn't just USC, or right now it is just USC. UCLA is the real big question mark. But shortly after, or not that long after, I should say, it was the rumor is Gonzaga is going to jump West Coast Conference. And then it doesn't stop there, because I thought, well, we did a nice interview with Commissioner Navarez earlier in the year. I'm going to reach out to her, see if she'll join us for 20 minutes, ask her what that would do to the West Coast Conference. And right about the time I'm going to send the email, what happens? I see the notice that she's moving from the West Coast Conference to the Mountain West Conference. Yep. And it's just like, wow, well, maybe this is just it. Anymore, it's just going to be the revolving door. You never know where everybody's going to land. It's good, of course, for the USCs, the UCLAs, depending on what the competition is going to be like and how it benefits them financially. But what does that do to the Pac-12? I mean, no disrespect to anybody or anything or any program. Please don't take it that way. But then there was the talk, oh, well, there's a chance that the Aztecs are going to go to the Pac-12. At this stage of the game, that does not add value to Pac-12 sports. I'm sorry, it just doesn't. I mean, yes, they're playing good. They're ranked right now. They're strong. But so do you play basketball Pac-12, but you leave the football team who's 7-4, whatever they are, and go into the Honolulu Bowl?
Yeah.
Do you really want them to go to the Pac-12 and that's your representation? So I there's nothing anybody can do about it. The sports fans, your hands are tied. I guess it's beneficial for some. Huggins made the comment after they were talking about Gonzaga possibly leaving. He said they'll get eaten alive if they transfer out of that. And the thing is, their early showings this season make him look like he's more of he's the prophet, because he maybe he's right. Maybe they need to stay where they're at. I don't think it's quite that drastic. We'll get to the Gonzaga team later. But yeah, UCLA and USC moving, wow, there's going to be impact all the way around. And
I
there's a
agree.
lot of pressure on them now
Mm-hmm.
to compete. This
Yeah.
is, yeah, it will
It
be very interesting to see.
it changes obviously the landscape of college football, college basketball, and all the other sports. I don't mean to disregard the other
Of course
sports,
not.
if you will. But look, let's be honest, in terms of what we can ingest as sports fans, college basketball, college football is the easiest. It's the most accessible, period. So that's always going to be at the forefront, I think, for all of us. And I agree with you. Obviously, San Diego State, you could look at the basketball program and go, hey, look at that. And yeah, that's great when you're adding them. But when you're losing, and not so much USC on the basketball side, but UCLA, who no matter what has happened in the last 10, 15 years, that is a blue blood program. When you think of Pac-12
Yeah.
basketball, one of the first teams has to be UCLA. It's just John Wooden. It's all the years of success. So I don't think, like you said, bringing San Diego State a trade for UCLA, even for USC basketball wise, maybe a little 50-50 there. In terms of USC and UCLA, looking at these two, and don't get it twisted, no matter what the athletic directors say, this or that, this is 115% a money grab, period. And you know what? I'm perfectly fine with it because one of them's a state school and I pay taxes. And hey, if you know what, UCLA doesn't need as much money, and maybe, I highly doubt it, but if there's a small chance our taxes go down, hey, fantastic. And USC is a private entity. They don't answer to anybody other than their boosters and their people. They're going from $20 million a year in revenue to $100 million, estimated, of course. Now, I would always ask the person, if you were given the opportunity to increase your earnings, your income by, 5 times, you would probably be doing your family a disservice not to do that. So let's get that out of the way. This is a cash grab, no matter what anybody says. But in terms of
Absolutely.
USC, UCLA on the football field, the first thing that jumps out to me is, how are these teams going to deal with going to West Lafayette, Indiana in November when it's 14 degrees and that's a good day, or going into Iowa and dealing with that crowd and stuff like that, because there are a lot of games that USC plays late in the year where maybe they go up to Stanford, maybe they go to Cal Berkeley. That's 50% full. I don't care what you're going to see. You go to a 3-9 Northwestern team, that place is going to be 70% full. Might not be a great football team. And then the other side of it, does this change the way USC and UCLA recruit?
Exactly
Because
what I was thinking. Yeah.
yeah, because now you're speed guys and this and that. Well, you're going to need to get some meat on that offensive line. You're going to need to get some meat on that defensive line. I think it changes everything in terms of the way they recruit. Now with the transfer portal that you brought up, that makes changing that culture a little easier. We saw it with USC this past year, what they've done going 4-8 to 11-1 and maybe playing for a playoff. That transfer portal was huge for them. And the basketball side of things, I don't think it's as drastic. I think USC and UCLA are stepping into an absolute buzzsaw of a conference, football as well, but basketball especially.
Yeah.
They're going to have some trouble there. The scheduling side of things is, they're going to have to spend a week in the Midwest at some point. And then even the conference tournament, I as far as I know, it's either Detroit or Chicago. That's a Eastern time zone. So
And
these are things that I think early on will be bigger issues. And then as they get more acquainted, it will be a little bit more, but I do expect the first few years to really have some rough spots, just because you don't quite know what to expect. You don't know how to deal with certain things. You're not used to going into Purdue or Iowa late November, or even Michigan, things like that. So it's going to be very interesting. And then in terms of the other sports, I can't really speak on, a bunch of the other ones. The first one that jumped out to me was water polo, because USC and UCLA are perennial absolute powers. So how that goes. But even baseball, because Big Ten pretty much starts their season a month after everyone else because of the weather.
they have to, right?
Yeah, exactly. So how does that change the dynamic of scheduling there? Obviously, early season, you don't do conference, but there are so many things up in the air that I honestly think there are more questions that we don't even know they're questions right now. Than
Yeah,
we have
and it's
answers
one
right
thing if you're UCLA or USC, and okay, so you know you're going to play UCLA, USC. That game's always going to be where it always is: Rose Bowl, Coliseum, somewhere like that. That's fine. But what about those games where you got to go on the road and you were just had to go to Oregon, you just had to go to Washington,
now. Yep.
you just had to go to Palo Alto, things like that? Look at the travel logistics. Look at the travel expense. And I get it. It is a money grab, and I know the boosters want to win, but it's just it boggles the mind. It is we all know, and you've said it, I've said it, college sports is a business. It's nothing more than a business anymore, unless it is the rowing team or something like
Yeah.
that. So it will be interesting to see how this all um, manifests in the future. What will manifest from it.
Yeah.
And the recruiting, you took the words right out of my mouth. It's like, I don't know if that's going to be a good thing or a bad thing.
Yeah. You're gonna get kids playing at Long Beach Poly and you say, oh, well, we have 3 games in the Midwest in November. Oh, you've
Right,
never seen
right.
snowfall? Well, guess what? You're probably going to play in a blizzard at some point. I mean, I'm not saying that that's going to turn players off, but hey, if maybe you're a warm weather guy, maybe I go up to Stanford and I stay home, stay in California, or at least, do things like that. I think you kind of hit it on the head as well. I think the big question is, are the ends going to justify the means? Because that's the
Correct.
thing right now, is figuring out if this all pays off, because oof. But moving
And I
on
know there's
to,
travel
yeah,
already. There's already travel, and they go to school differently than the average student or the normal student. And I'll give everybody the benefit of the doubt and say education is first and foremost. It's paramount to what we're doing at the universities. It's not sports. Sports is not first. But academically, what does it do to these kids now? This kind of a travel schedule. I
yeah,
would think it would have to impact them, but again, what do I know?
exactly. Well, and it's even setting the groundwork, because I obviously a lot of these programs, they have, hey, if you have midterms, this is what we normally do, or this and that. Well, the first 2 years, it's, oh, how are you going to deal with that once again when you're across the country? As opposed to, oh, we have to go up to Seattle this weekend. Oh, that's going to be a little tough. Try going to Iowa City and dealing with all that. But
And even, if you wanted to, and I'm sure they have them, either the alums or even student body, hey, let's drive up to Berkeley. Let's
mhm,
go to that game. Let's make plans to be at that game. Make plans to be up in Palo Alto, even to Oregon, even to Washington. What are you going to hop in the car on a long weekend and drive out to Ohio State? I don't think it's going to happen. So, what happens to the fan following too?
yeah, I agree. I mean, let's be honest, no disrespect to a lot of those cities. I'm sure they're fantastic, but I have to imagine the Pac-12 has more, let's say, appealing vacation cities. I would say Palo Alto may be a little more welcoming than Columbus. Weather-wise, logistics-wise, things like that, especially for
Yeah.
us West Coasters. So there's a lot of question marks heading into that. But looking at this season, basketball wise, of course, what are the main, I guess, headlines, or at least the main story that I've noticed this year, are the amount of upsets we've seen, all kinds of different upsets. We've seen low majors take down kind of those middle of the pack Power 5 schools. Just saw Marquette dominate a really good Baylor team. I'm sorry, Raider Jim, but we saw Texas take care of Gonzaga. We've seen kind of those teams that we know are good take down those teams that we thought were elite, or at least we expect to be elite. It's been incredible this year. So my question to you, Raider Jim, what do you think is driving this parity in college basketball that we're seeing this year and really over the last 5 years?
Now, of course, it's like, stuff happens, or I don't know, I don't have an answer. But as I look around, okay, what is different between now and 2 years ago, 5 years ago? And I think when it really a light bulb went off in my head is uh, later on we're going to talk about Oscar Tshiebwe, right? That kid has made $2.5 million with this name, image, likeness thing. And you got to wonder what impact that's really having on some teams and some players, because they were talking about some endorsement he had, And when the plane landed, the first call he made was to his agent to say, "Where do you need me?" It wasn't to say, "Yeah, I got here, I'm safe, I got to go to practice, I got to do this, I got to do that." It was, "Okay, agent, where do you need me?" And you got to wonder if somehow, some way, this is impacting the programs. I don't know if Drew Timmy has a lot of endorsements. He may not have, I know he has a few. Um, but is that just some of the thing that's happening here?
Yeah, that's actually my first one that I had was name, image, likeness changes. And two big ones that jump out to me, and I haven't seen it yet, but I do expect to see down the road something like this. But I keep my eye on Oregon and I keep my eye on Maryland. And the reason I keep my eye on both of those is Oregon is, of course, Nike. That's why they have a different uniform every week for football. They have everything immediately in with Nike. Same thing on Maryland's side with Under Armour. Now, obviously, Under Armour isn't the same level as Nike, but we're still talking about an almost instant endorsement. And you hit it on the head. I mean, if I'm a recruiter for USC and I'm rooting against or recruiting against someone from, let's say, Utah, trying to go to Utah or wants to go to Utah, I say, look, what better chance would you have to get exposure and get these endorsements in Salt Lake City or Los Angeles? Things like that. This has now become the part of the recruiting. Now, I will say, though, I think this is a very, for the most part, basketball and football, I don't want to say problem, but let's just say situation. Because, I know there are, some other athletes in different sports, but I would venture to say that a high majority of the NIL money is going to either basketball and football teams. And I think we've seen parity get in both of those sports. But I think for basketball, the name, image, likeness rights, it's an extra bullet for a small school to use. Say, hey, you know what? You got 4 years to be a starter and be in somebody's eye. Over there, you go to Duke, you got to wait 2 years just to get on the floor. And you got 4 other guys with NIL deals, and who knows if they screw that up and maybe we're done with them, blah, blah, blah. So it's just another bullet. I will also say something that I think this has been going on longer, but the one and dones, you hit on it earlier. You're having kids, Dukes and the Kentuckys and things like that. They're getting kids in for 1 year, maybe 2. You don't have an ability to build cohesion. Well, a lot of these low majors and mid majors, their best years are when they have 3 and 4 seniors on the floor who have played together, who know where they're going to be. That's why we see the 14 and 15 seeds in the NCAA tournaments with 3 or 4 seniors take down some of these one and done teams, because when it gets down to it, they know what is expected and what to expect from their teammates. Now, there is one other thing I wanted to throw out there. The situation in Louisville. My goodness, you want to talk about a blue blood? Currently, the Louisville Cardinals are 0-7. They have losses to Bellarmine. I probably butchered that name. I don't never heard of them until they lost to Louisville. They also lost to Wright State and App State. They also have losses to Arkansas by 26 points. Texas Tech, they lost by 32. Cincinnati, they lost by 19, and Maryland lost by 25. I looked down the rest of their schedule. They have 2, I believe, winnable games. They'll play Florida A&M and Lipscomb. And then the rest of that is ACC play and Power 5 schools. So there's a chance that Louisville goes winless. I doubt it. They'll probably get 1 or 2 and maybe 1 in the ACC, sneak up on somebody. But the situation in Louisville, it's almost like they are the extreme vacuum. They were the ones that got sucked out first, and that blue blood is the one who is dealing with a lot of the Patino fallout for sure. But that's been a while, and they have not found their feet. And that
even Kentucky is not burning it up this year either. It's, they're like watching a bad stock. It just keeps going down and down and down and down. And so what used to be the biggest rivalry in that state, everybody, it didn't matter if you were from that state or you had an interest. You heard that Louisville and Kentucky were going to play, you tuned in, you wanted to see that game. they're going to start losing that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, that might be a situation for Louisville where, yeah, we're all down with COVID. We'll just postpone it, cancel it. Yeah, we'll lose 2-0 in the forfeit, whatever it goes down as. But moving on to a very interesting, we haven't, we didn't dive into the top 25 like we normally do on the podcast, and that's mainly because, look, it's November 30th. The top 25 isn't huge right now, but at the top of that top 25 is a different team that we're used to. The Houston Cougars, ranked number 1. So I'll ask you, Raider Jim, how good do you believe this Houston team truly is?
No disrespect to Houston. I think they're a good program. Usually the last 2-3 seasons we've done this, we both at the same time or various times go, man, them kids are fast. Them kids are good. But if you look at what they've won so far this year, there's not big names on the top of their schedule that make you go, wow, they beat this one, this one, this one. So we'll see. The coming weeks will tell. We're out of this, holiday tournaments and this, that, and the other. Pretty soon it's going to be league play or conference play, and we'll see what happens. Now, I've been waiting to ask this question since I knew we were doing this. Were you even born the last time Houston was number 1?
I would assume that would have been the Phi Slamma Jamma day, right?
83.
No, I was not.
There you go. I mean, Clyde Drexler was probably retired by the time you were born, but I was laughing because
I do remember Clyde to Glide. He was in the swan song of his career, but I do remember.
I was doing my little research on Houston and looking at that. I was like, he wasn't even born.
Nope.
Just
I don't even know if my parents had met. Let's be honest. 5 years before.
Right. Right. Yeah, that was that. But that team was fantastic. Yeah. And I've always liked the program. I have nothing against them whatsoever. So, congratulations to them for getting back to that number 1. Interesting point, and I didn't get the time to look it up today, but I was wondering, so what is their, what are their NIL commitments right now? Do they have anybody that's got anything of note? And what about Texas? And what about Virginia? What about Arizona? Be curious to really just, even the top 10 teams and say, okay, who's got people out there that are, maybe preoccupied? Because that's what really happens in my mind. Mm-hmm. Say what you will, they're preoccupied. I remember after the Gonzaga game last year and walked out by the team bus and had my grandsons with me, and I'll never forget them. They've never been turned down. And it wasn't rude. He was very nice. He was very polite. He was just like, yeah, man, let's do the pictures. That's great. But when my grandson said, can we get your autograph to Chet Holmgren? He says, no, I can't. I can't do that. I was like, wow, imagine that. You can tell me no all day long, you can't give me an autograph. But these are kids who are jazzed to meet you, but it's like, no, why don't we just say, if you can Venmo me, if you Venmo me $40, I'll give you an autograph. I mean, that's might as well what it would be. That'd be a great skit, by the way, on Saturday Night Live.
Man. Oh boy.
Yeah.
Well, and that is also, I mean, obviously I do know I've seen at least athletes kind of come out and be vocal about the fact that they know, and this obviously was not the case, but they've noticed maybe kids that don't know anything asking for autographs for adults who are going to then go sell it. And I do think that, and then obviously like you said, the NIL rights, that signature now is, you can't give that away it's so messed up. It really isn't great. And I'm sure your grandchildren will, for better or worse, they'll remember that. And, the picture's great and all that stuff, but they'll also remember that, oh, but we didn't get that autograph. And I mean, that's almost unfathomable for me as a kid. It was, Tony Gwynn had to get pulled away when, he was giving me his autograph. Yeah. Definitely different things. I'm not bad mouthing Chet Holmgren in any stretch of the imagination, but the priorities obviously have changed. Going back to Houston, I'm right there with you. I think they're very fortunate. Their preseason ranking, I think, was like 6 or 4. So they've just kind of risen. Their best win that I could find was actually, no, they haven't. I didn't put a good win because they haven't got a good win, but The next 3 Saturdays are going to be very interesting for this team. They got St. Mary's this Saturday. Then on the 10th, they'll face Alabama, who's currently ranked number 11. And then the 17th of December, if this team is still undefeated, this will probably be their biggest game of the season. They'll go up to Charlottesville and face currently number 3 Virginia. I think by the 17th or the 18th of December, if Houston is still ranked number 1 and undefeated, I think both of us on the podcast will go, okay, they are legit. But as of right now, they're 7-0 and without a big win. Let's be honest. I would say San Diego State has a better win resume than Houston right now. But with that, it is time to dive into the Gonzaga report with Raider Jim. Get to hear all about what's going on up in Spokane. Mr. Martinez, the floor is yours.
Okay, kids, take it easy, take it easy. Take off the life jackets. Don't shoot any flares in the air. 2 losses is 2 losses. Let me tell you, the runs these guys have had starting the seasons in the top 10, the top 5, the top of the game, number 2 in the game, and you drop a couple games. Yeah. Should they have been winnable games? Who's to say? Because you really don't know how good that competition was. They should have lost to Michigan State. And when they played Michigan State, I don't think Michigan State was even in the top 25. No. But I watched Michigan State play, and I was like, holy cow, won't be long before they're ranked. And there they are. They're being ranked again. So I almost think that long-term, good for the Zags. I'm glad to see them out of the top 10 because you know what? You're not going to be looking over your shoulder the entire season. The talk isn't going to be, oh, they got a real challenge. Oh, they're going to get beat. Oh, they're going to get beat. Friday, what's the game going to be? I already see the headlines, the little teasers there. Matchup of the 2021 championship game. No, it isn't. It's completely different rosters. Yeah. It's the matchup of the same school names, and that's it. Drew Timmy's going to be there. That's great. But I don't think there's anything to worry about. You used the word cohesive. That's a little bit of what I'm seeing here. They're not as fine-tuned yet. It's going to take them, unfortunately, it's going to take them a little while. It might be a little bit more work this season, but Gonzaga is going to be just fine. The telltale is not going to be the 2 losses that they've had and the tough game they have against Baylor that's coming up in just 48 hours. The real telltale is going to be, can they run the West Coast Conference, because the West Coast Conference is going to be tough this year. Let me tell you, the addition of Steve Lavin as head coach for USD, wow, that's a game changer right there. He's been to the Final Four. He knows how to get to the Final Four. Now, it's been a while, but he can do it. Why? He can coach. You may not agree with some of his styles and some of the things he does, but the guy can coach. And he's been away from it long enough. He's more relaxed and ready to go. I think it's going to be, they're going to be a great program. The University of San Francisco is going to be tough. St. Mary's is always tough. And those schools I just mentioned, University of San Francisco, of course, the Zags, USD, even Portland. Tell you what, the school that's going to have the real trouble this year, probably in the West Coast Conference, is BYU. Yeah. I think they're the one that's not going to be, fighting for a spot at the big dance. Gonzaga is going to be just fine, and the West Conference is going to be pretty decent to watch this year.
Yeah, I agree. Honestly, I think this is a positive for Gonzaga. They didn't lose to Eastern Washington. They didn't lose a game that is a quote unquote bad loss. I can't remember the last time Gonzaga had a quote unquote bad loss outside of the conference. Now, I know everyone's going to expect them, it's more than likely they're going to slip up in the conference. Like you brought up, they're really good teams. St. Mary's always gives them their best. But I think, like you said, the fact that they'll be able to play at 9:00 at night on the East Coast or at midnight on the East Coast and not be number 1. And maybe they beat Portland only by 5. And a year ago when Gonzaga was number 1, the people on the West Coast who know nothing about the Portland program would go, that's not good enough because I don't know who Portland is. So therefore Gonzaga is fraudulent. Now they'll just be, that team. And as long as I think they get a top 4 seed, I think they'll be perfectly fine. Because once you get to the Sweet 16, you're more than likely playing a good team no matter what. So throw the seeds out the window at that point. As long as you get to that second weekend, I think Gonzaga will be just fine. I think they have one of the best players overall. And I mean, out of all the big five, I talked about, the inability to keep players there. Drew Timme seems to be kind of the antithesis of that. And I know Gonzaga isn't technically in a big five conference, but Gonzaga is a powerhouse, let's be honest. So I think Gonzaga, like you said, is just fine. If anything, this is a positive. They don't have to deal with a year long. Can you go undefeated? Are you going to win the national championship? I think they can just go into the tournament probably as a 2 seed, and just beat Gonzaga and not have that unbelievable pressure that they seem to always have, being the number 1 team all year. So like
Yeah, before they start conference play, they're going to get top 10 Baylor this week.
Yep.
They're going to get top 10 Oregon right after Christmas, and then they're also going to get Alabama before that. So 3 more ranked teams. If they can take care of business there, they're going to be just fine. And it is somewhat related to Gonzaga, but maybe not really. But yeah, he is. Congratulations, mad respect to Tommy Lloyd and what he's doing with the Arizona Wildcats. Oh my gosh, that is a dangerous team. That's a real dangerous team. So keep your eye. And is anybody surprised? He sat next to Coach View for so many years, and they are great friends still. And he did nothing but endorse Tommy Lloyd when he moved. Lloyd took Omar Balla with him, who is playing like a monster. So congratulations to those guys, and I'll be having my eyes on the Arizona program.
Definitely. So moving on to my side of things, obviously San Diego State here is the team that I'm following, things like that. San Diego State at the moment ranked number 24 in the country. They are 5-2. They have a few good wins so far. They beat BYU handily. They beat Stanford. They beat Ohio State. However, I don't quite know if those 3 teams, Ohio State may be a tournament team. I think BYU, Stanford, a bubble would be probably hopeful for them, but we'll see going forward. But they've definitely played some good teams. They did have a little bit of a rough time in Maui, but you can't really, knock them too much. They lost to Arizona, who, for my money right now, is the best team in the country. And then they also lost to Arkansas. Probably should have won. Actually, they definitely should have won that game, but they didn't. Arkansas also ranked. So neither of those losses are going to be something that keeps San Diego State out of the tournament if it comes down to that. So not a whole lot of panic now. I've been, reading up the message boards, and I got to tell you that San Diego State fans are some of the more, I guess, spoiled fans, because if you've been a fan of San Diego State for as long as I have, basketball wise, at least, this, no matter what they do, it's so much better than it used to be. And it's like they lose 2 games back to back to top 25 teams, and people are ready to throw Dutcher down the river. It blows my mind that we're talking about San Diego State ranked preseason number 19, currently ranked number 24. And there are people who are screaming that they're underachieving. Blows my mind how far this program has come. Going forward, San Diego State doesn't really have a big test until they head to Moraga to take on St. Mary's. It's going to be a very, very big game there. Seems like these 2 teams play each other every year, and it's always tight. I think a big measuring stick for both of those programs. St. Mary's will kind of look at San Diego State as a lower tier Gonzaga, and San Diego State's going to look at St. Mary's as their big final test before conference play begins. And as of right now, the Mountain West has 3 undefeated teams. The best one of them at the moment looks like UNLV. They're 7-0 at the moment. 2 good wins, wins over Dayton and Minnesota. Still will need a little bit more volume down the stretch to really kind of be an at-large team. New Mexico also undefeated. Their best win is a road win at SMU. I don't think that's terribly impressive. And then you also have Utah State. No big wins, but I will say they did get a nice road win here right down the road taking on the aforementioned Steve Lavin and those USD Toreros. So Mountain West looking okay. I don't think there's any team that has jumped out that immediately outside of San Diego State that you can say that is a tournament team. But I will say, as much as I don't like it when we play them because they are our rivals, there's something nice to see UNLV back kind of at the top of this conference, because there were some times there UNLV, a perennial power in this conference, was just a non-factor. And as much as I had fun with it, it's the conference is better when New Mexico and UNLV are playing at the top of their games. And obviously Utah State has been towards the top for quite some time. So
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
To the San Diego State side of things.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at the beginning of their schedule, it's like, okay, they won 4 unranked teams, and then they dropped the back-to-back against ranked teams, which was damaging. Then they struggled against UC Irvine.
Yeah.
That was a battle too. And then you look at the rest of their schedule, and as you said, you pointed out, they have the game on the 10th of December against St. Mary's, and that's always going to be tough, especially if you're going to their house. Why do you think, or maybe you already know, why is there not a stronger schedule? I mean, even if you get beat, you got to hand it to Mark Few for every year saying, hey, we'll play anybody. We'll go anywhere, we'll play anybody. And by God, they do, even if it means we're going to get beat by Texas, we're going to get beat by Purdue. But we're going to get on the court against them.
Yeah,
I think the Aztecs need to beef that up.
I agree. Because the Mountain West, I mean, maybe 5-6 years ago, it was that top mid-major right there with, the Missouri Valley in terms of depth. Not obviously the West Coast Conference has the best mid-major team, but in terms of depth, the Mountain West, it's really kind of struggled over the past few years. And I would love to sit here and say it's because nobody wants to play San Diego State and, this little guy, blah, blah, blah. But I don't think that's really the case. Honestly, I think for this year, what they looked at is they looked at that Maui Invitational and thought they could get a lot of work done in those 3 games that would do enough. And maybe they were fearful that that would be an 0-3, weekend. And maybe they dropped 3-4 more in non-conference, and that would be a problem. I was by far more worried. Now, obviously, Arizona dominated San Diego State, but as much as I love San Diego State, they're not on the same level as Arizona. Should have beat Arkansas. But my biggest concern was what you brought up, was the struggles with UC Irvine, because you're going to have to be playing a lot of teams like the way UC Irvine plays in our conference. It's difficult. And I almost feel like last year maybe gave them some false hope, because I was surprised that San Diego State was just, San Diego State's in the tournament. They weren't a bubble team. They weren't anything like that. They were just, they're going to be an 8 seed no matter what happens in the tournament. And I just wonder if San Diego State looks around and goes, oh, have we made that? Like, can we schedule the UC Irvines, the Cal State Fullertons, and have a good little run in between non-conference, and then have our conference schedule? And as long as we do what we need to do, we'll just be in as an at-large team. I wonder if that's starting to get into it. But you're right. San Diego State does not schedule what they need to make things. Because at this point, you kind of have to win out in non-conference, and you're going to probably have to go 15-3 in the Mountain West to really, really feel comfortable. And we've talked about it multiple times. Sometimes half the battle of a basketball game is just getting to some of these campuses. There's going to be a time in probably January or February where San Diego State doesn't land till 4 or 5 in the morning before a game the same day, and they have to go and deal with that. So you don't give yourself a whole lot of options in that. And I agree. College basketball, you can lose 4 or 5 non-conference games, but if they're good teams, it doesn't kill you. This isn't the BCS where the minute you lose 3 games, it's done. So I definitely think going forward, I think that's something they definitely need to think about. But what we started with at the start of the show, San Diego State possibly going to the Pac-12, that will bring that schedule way back. I'll tell you that right now, for San Diego State. If they get into the Pac-12, you're going to see maybe a St. Mary's as the marquee game. And that's it, because they know they're going to have some trouble in the Pac-12 no matter how good they are. They're not going to be able to just walk in like they do with the Mountain West.
And I noticed they're not playing the Toreros this year.
And that was a question, I thought maybe, okay, COVID, things like that, but I feel like we're removed from that and things like that. I feel like it's kind of a no-brainer. I don't think San Diego State's good enough to not play USD. I'm
No, I know with Gonzaga is not coming to San Diego this year. They're
okay.
playing USD once, and my son was explaining it to me. He said it's something about the West Coast Conference and this rotational thing they're doing based on wins and losses from the previous year. So if you had a real down year, the odds are you're not going to get the big team coming to your campus the
Oh.
following year. And so maybe this was State's time to go to Jenny Craig.
Gotcha.
Because of
Yeah.
that. Nope, we don't do that now.
Wow.
And I don't know how that came to be. I don't know who decided that that was a good rule, but I always look forward to seeing those two teams play, no matter who, usually it was the Aztecs that came out on top.
But it
This
was
year, because it's Lavin coaching, I would have
yeah.
liked to have seen the matchup to see what it would have been.
And USD always plays SDSU tough. It don't matter who's out there. They're always right there. And another part of it too for San Diego State, all the pressure is on them. There is nothing. USD goes out and they lose by 10. They might get a bump in that situation. San Diego State has to it's almost a no win. So I do wonder if maybe that, but at the same time, like that's I think for me, one of the best parts of college basketball is the City Series. Once again, can USD take down San Diego State? As much as I love San Diego State, I still love USD as well, and would never begrudge them if they took down San Diego State. So moving on to final segment of the show, it's our player spotlight, and Raider Jim brought him up earlier, but we are going to be talking about the Kentucky senior. Yes, a Kentucky senior and reigning National Player of the Year, Oscar Shishebwe. Probably butchered that. Apologies. But he was born in the Congo. He's a 6'9" forward, and obviously the reigning player of the year. He averaged 17 points and 15 boards last year. He's on the somewhat same path this year, 14 points and 13 rebounds. One thing that jumped out to me, his free throw percentage has gone up, was 69% last year, up to 83% now. That's what NBA scouts really like to see, a big man who can live in the 75 and 80s. Another part of this game that I really like is field goal percentage. Now, obviously, he's not shooting threes, things like that, not jumpers, but his field goal percentage has never been lower than 52% in the 4 years he started at Kentucky. And last year it was a very impressive 61%.
Yeah.
Now, coming down to this, the big part of this, I have a big game circled, and it's in England, but Kentucky is going to face Michigan in a few weeks. And that's going to be a huge, huge game, because not only we get to see Shishebwe and Kentucky, but we're going to see him matched up with, I would say, these two guys, him and Hunter Dickinson for Michigan and Drew Timme, three best big men in the college basketball. We're going to see Shishebwe and Dickinson match up in the O2 Arena in England. It's an interesting one. I don't know if it's this Saturday or next Saturday, but that's going to be a game to keep an eye on for Shishebwe. But Raider Jim, what are your thoughts on Kentucky's senior forward?
I think it's great. He's a good kid. As everything I've read about him, he's a fantastic, he's a fantastic teammate. He's a fantastic student as far as student of the game and being coachable. Big, big, big word right there. I like that when you hear it, just when you say it without even thinking about it. That's a coachable kid. If you can coach a kid, and they're gonna listen to you, they're gonna do fine. I'm gonna be surprised to see what happens when it comes to NBA draft time. Is he going to get one of those looks on? He could have a couple more pounds on at 6'8". He's weighing 230 right now, which isn't bad. He's got some good size to him. I also couldn't find anything, and I don't recall the situation. He started out at West Virginia, and he actually started. He played in 31 games his first year. He started 31 games his first year. He wasn't doing too bad, playing 23 minutes a game. Then it went to played in 10 games, started 10 games. The production went down a little bit. So, and that's when he decided, forget it, I'm done here. I'm going to go to Kentucky. So, and I don't know what drove that. Again, I heard it was for personal reasons. That's the only thing I can find. Personal reasons. What does that mean? I don't know, but he's a fun kid to watch. It is going to be fun to see him in that big game against Michigan. What a matchup! Put on the elbow pads because there's going to be some bumping on the inside.
Yeah, it's not too often you see a reigning player of the year in basketball coming back.
Back, exactly.
Especially a guy, but I do think you hit it on the head. Now if he was given a top 5, top 10 projection in last year's draft, he probably wouldn't be at Kentucky. I don't think he came back, just because he loves Big Blue. I'm sure he does. But once again, if an NBA agent would have said, yeah, you've been our first round pick, things may have been different. But he is, as crazy as this says, to be a 6'8", 6'9" guy. He's a tweener. He's kind of in that, the NBA is obviously getting a lot bigger. Are
Right.
you big enough to play the 4? I don't think he's big enough. He's definitely not strong enough. And once again, he's young and he'll have time to put pounds on, and it's no disrespect, but he can't be a 5 in the NBA right now. And can he be a 4 and really bring that rebounding? Because that's what he brings to the table. He's going to be a presence inside, no doubt about it. But his offensive rebounding is maybe some of the best we've seen in quite some time. I think that takes a big drop because when you're 6'9", 230, you're a big kid in college. When you're 6'9", 230 in the NBA, you're kind of on the lower end of that, as crazy as, at least on the poundage side of things. He's going to have to put some work in there. Nothing that, is going to stop him. And like you said, coachable. I'm sure every NBA coach would love to have a crack at a guy like this who is coachable, has some size. All you got to do is put some meat on them bones. So it'll be very interesting to see where his future lies. But for the time being, he's focused on keeping Kentucky in the top 25 and hopefully going after, for his sake, another player of the year. But that's all we have for you this week. Raider Jim, final thoughts on the In the Paint return.
Good to be talking basketball. What can I say? It just really is. Very glad we got back at it. Very, very glad to be part of it, and looking forward to a great 2022-2023 season.
Amen. It's never too early to start counting down to Selection Sunday. I don't know
there
the
you
exact
go.
day, but we're officially getting closer. We're 1 month closer. At least the calendar will turn over here in about 7 hours here on the West Coast, as we're recording on the 30th of November, as we dive into December. And college basketball in December has always kind of been a bit of an enigma to me. It's very few teams are going to punch their ticket. But we are going to see some teams rip up their tickets this month. Full disclosure, don't fully dive into college basketball till post Super Bowl, just because with everything going on. But college basketball has really caught my attention because of what we talked about, the upsets, and that builds for a March Madness, hopefully, that we will see even more chaos. Because if we're seeing it now in November, March is going to be incredible, and we'll be here for it, and we'll be guiding you along as well throughout that time. But with that, we thank you all so much for listening to this edition of the In the Paint podcast, presented by the First Off the Bench Podcast Network. Everyone comes off the bench. We are first. It's time for you all to go wash your hands and stop hating, everybody. We'll talk to you all very soon, and take care.
Peace out, everybody.